So for me, in the B2C world, especially when you're doing retail, there's a very obvious sort of connection there because you're talking to someone in person. It's the same idea that we go to a farmer's market and spend 3 times the cost on a carrot versus going to a Whole Foods, is that you go there to talk to someone. You go there to hear their story, that experience, the reason why. And I think that's a reason to believe. There's the product, but then there's also the story behind it and why it is so great. And when you're in retail and you're trying to explain why a speaker is so amazing to a customer, and then you demo it, you hear it, there's something that nudges the customer to sort of say, oh, I want to hear what this actually does because you've told me such a great story behind all the hours behind it, what the reasoning why.
Hello and welcome to Best Story Wins. I'm your host, Josh, and I'm here with my co-host, Jason. And today our guest is Andrew Lee from Microsoft. Hey, Mike. Hey, Andrew. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Andrew.
Andrew, for people that don't know you yet, maybe this is their first time, getting a sense of who you are. Can you give a background of what you do at Microsoft, and also can you share a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Andrew Lee. I work for Microsoft. I work specifically in what we call channel partner marketing. My TD, too long, didn't read, sort of job description is I write the creative messaging for what a retail salesperson will ultimately say on a global level. So I'll look at our product positioning, look at our product messaging, the different bits and pieces of our product specifically for Surface, and that's what I cover. And then I disseminate that into things that can be cascaded down into a retail store, in which when you go into, let's say, a PC sales store like a Best Buy in the US or a Currys in the UK, and when they talk to you about Surface, the words hopefully that they're using, the tone and context, is derived from my work. And so that's what I do from a creative storytelling point of view. And then I guess a little bit about me. My entire career in life has been in a retail store, with the exception of a short stint at JP Morgan. But I started a long time ago, right out of college. And actually, I had no idea what I was going to do when I left college. As many people do, they're like, okay, I don't have a job lined up. I did not do the post-college internship to sneak into an agency or to any company. I was kind of wondering what I was going to do. And I had majored in economics, which is a fun major. And my economics training was a lot of behavioral as well as just pure statistical stuff. So mathing was what I was doing a lot of. And my first job ended up being a in-store brand rep for a company called Creative Labs. And they made things like Sound Blaster and other things like that back in the 2000s. They were quite popular at the time. And I was in a store a lot of my time. There were a few times when I was working with different accounts as well, but Fry's was my home for a long time. And so I would go into a Fry's every few weeks, set up shop, so to speak, and actually just talk to customers and demo our wares. And that gave me a really interesting, grounded awareness of how retail worked. I'd never worked retail before, and just being there, not actually working retail, but on the brand side of things, taught me a lot about customer behavior and how to win someone over, I guess is the best way to put it. Because you're in a place which is very commoditized, a laptop, a sound card at the time, speakers. And so I did that for a few years, joined this marketing agency just shortly after that, supporting Microsoft, went back and forth between full-time and agency life, which was interesting to bounce between the two, working on retail marketing, so channel marketing. Ended up at Amazon for 8 years, where I ended up being the lead for channel marketing. In this particular situation, it was channel marketing and retail. So all that experience in the retail store found me a place at Amazon where I was launching products like Echo or Fire TV and creating the visual merch presence, creating the messaging for our training reps that would go in the store to talk to the sales associates. And I did that for about 8 years. I had a short stint at JP Morgan, which was completely and utterly different. And I think in the 2 years there, uh, well, I met amazing people, but going from B to C to B to B is night and day in terms of process, but you'll find that there are a lot of things that are basically the same, just in a different level, a different audience. And now back at Microsoft doing more B2C work again, I find myself sort of more thoughtful, I think, knowing that there are different levels that I never had to push myself in academically. Now I'm actually doing it as a work thing to play with marketing and a lot more looking at the behavioral side of things, because I think both in the B2C where I learned a lot of that and in the B2B, you find that there are a lot of commonalities in terms of how to, I would say, nudge someone to a certain behavior or to a certain outcome. And yeah, that's my CV. Should I post that on LinkedIn just the way it is, or how's that sound?
Yeah, the about me. Uh, so with those different roles and you started touching on some of the commonalities. What do you think is the through line that really connects everything together, or like how you see these things, like looking back, like it's like, oh, this led to this, like that. What is how are those dots all connected in your mind?
I think one of the more interesting bits about retail is how we all try to find like a human connection in all the work that we do. And I find even when I was at JP Morgan, where it was strictly B2B, very sort of big banky, those that I talked to, those I worked with, always um, they always found that the best marketing efforts were the ones where there was some level of, oh, this message is for me, like this is personalized very much so for me. Um, in the B2C world, especially when you're doing retail, I think there's a very obvious sort of connection there because you're talking to someone in person. It's the same idea that we go to a farmer's market and spend 3 times the cost on a carrot versus going to a Whole Foods, is that you go there to talk to someone. You go there to hear their story, that experience, the reason why, and or and I think that's and a reason to believe. Like it's there's the product, but then there's also the story behind it and why it is so great. And when you're in retail and you're trying to explain why a speaker is so amazing to a customer, and then you demo it and you hear it, there's something that nudges the customer to sort of say, oh, I want to hear what this actually does because you've told me such a great story behind all the hours behind it, what the reasoning why. And in B2B, it's almost the same in many senses, where you find yourself looking at a customer and say, well, how can I create a story that is not just, oh, this product is great, but this is great because of all the hard work, all the nuances that we've done to make it just for you, customer. And then, if you have the opportunity, like many cases, you can demo it either online or in person. You find that the customer is almost convincing themselves that this is awesome because you have this shared sense of accomplishment that if you've put in that many hours and you're sharing that story, then now the customer feels like they've put in those many hours and they're sharing into that story. And they're actually more willing to consider the product or service because now it almost feels like they have a skin in the game. And that works both, I think, in B2B and B2C, where if you tell someone, for example, that they're a runner, if you label them, oh, because of these behaviors, you're a runner, you have a runner's body. You'd be surprised how many people start riffing off that mentally and thinking, well, if this person who's an expert in running, let's say they were, um, is telling me that I look like a runner, or I look like a nerd, or I look like a creator, suddenly you're now thinking, well, maybe I am, or maybe I should be. And you can start, and then they start investigating all that stuff. They end up buying really nice shoes or whatnot. But I think the same thing with just buying stuff as a whole, as a consumer or the B2B side. If you work with those target audiences and you help them label themselves, and then you start giving them all that reinforcement to say, oh, you must love audio, so you must be discerning. This product is for the discerning audiophile. You're now creating that mental connection. And I found both in B2C, where I was doing it in a store and saying, hey, you want to hear this great audio track? I bet you'd become an audiophile after this. You're now almost creating that mindset for the customer. And I think that through line goes every which way if you do it right. And it really gets the customer to consider your product and service, because now they feel like they can own some of that story.
So Andrew, in my experience, the people that are really good at marketing don't just think in terms of numbers and workflows, but they try to get inside the mind of the customers, and you could even make the claim that maybe they operate as psychologists. How do you think behavioral science and marketing intersect in your work, and like where do you see that? Where do you see that heading?
We're all observers of behavior. As someone who spent a lot of time in my early econ courses trying to justify in a paper why people buy a more expensive tomato sauce versus a less expensive tomato sauce, there are a lot of psychological things behind it that are not rational. I think this has probably been said by other people on your podcast, but I think it's worth saying again, is that people are not rational buyers. And it's one of those senses where you have to get away from the idea that if your product is better because it has more megahertz or less sugar or more protein, or the facts are facts, right? Those are your product truths. But I think as buyers, psychologically, they're almost like table stakes. I see some of these things. And then you have to really get into, well, behaviorally, if I was that customer, why would I buy this version over another? And it's, you almost have to think on the most simplest terms. And I think that's where the psychology comes into play. If I'm buying, and I'll go back to tomato sauce, because I find that tomato sauce is a fun one to talk about. And you can use this across other commodities and even B2B. There are a lot of companies that produce things. Tomato sauce is one of them. There's many tomato sauces. If you go to an aisle and you look at all the different variants of that product, there are different brands, there are different flavors, there are different sort of labels, but there's certain brands that stand out, and sometimes in a way that doesn't make sense from a customer point of view, because if you look at some of the products, you see them all priced about the same. They're about $2.99 a jar or $3.99 a jar, and then you have certain brands that are $12 a jar, or something that kicks off the psychological behavior. There's like, wait, why is this one more expensive? This is better. Like, what is the story? And if the marketing has done a good job, then if you look at certain brands, you say, oh, I know this is worth $12 a jar or $8 a jar because the parsley or the basil is picked in Italy. And so that obviously means it's a better a jar of tomato sauce. And that, truth be told, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if that actually is basil from Italy, if it's high quality basil from Italy or low quality basil from Italy. But if you frame it in a way that then the customer behaviorally thinks, oh, well, this must be better, I'm going to have a better experience, you're now moving away from just marketing a thing like a commodity, and now you're creating a story behind it, because now you can say, well, you're now experiencing it like someone in Italy experiences pasta, and suddenly the emotional story then takes over, that emotional draw takes over, that experiential economy that has been talked about for the many years takes over, and suddenly now you're like, okay, this must be worth more money. And I say for the B2B side, where there's a lot of payment processing companies out there, there's a lot of AI companies out there, and so on. The best storytelling, I think, when it comes to that is sharing not just, oh, we can do more LOM better, or we can do more prompts better, but it's a matter of, this is our, um, this is our, what's the best way to put it? This is our reason why your experience with us is going to be different, just like the tomato sauce where you get Italian basil. Maybe your AI tool has a unique thing that separates yourself out. And then how did you get that? I guess in those pasta stories, you hear, farmers hand picking basil. If you think about B2B, you're thinking, well, I'm hand picking these AI tools specifically because, or this is built specifically just for you, and finding that experience to say, well, I guess I should pause for a second. I would say, like, at the end of the day, a lot of the reason why we buy stuff is because we want to tell our friends we bought it. And so, if we say, like, we bought the really nice pasta sauce, it's like, oh, I'm going to tell my friends I bought the nice pasta sauce, and they're expected to have a great experience too. I want to show off. I think the same thing with a lot of B2B. And I think Salesforce actually is the best variant of this, is that um, they want people to go around telling other people they bought Salesforce because it sounds cool and it's special. So I don't know where this tangent is going. I'm just trying to figure out in my head, like, most buyers don't buy because it's cheaper. It's just because they think it's better. And I think that's what great storytelling is how do I make the customer feel like they are getting the most value out of their dollar, even if that product isn't even better, or in many cases doesn't always solve what they want. And I think it's not that they're being disingenuous. I don't think marketing in the truest sense is to manipulate people, but it is sort of showing customers a need and then having that customer be able to say, look how awesome this is. This works great for me. Um, and I think that's where we as marketers just need to be thoughtful about how we market, because we do have the ability to nudge people to buy things that, you know, are not necessarily better, or maybe it is. But I think that's being a good marketer, is that you're not manipulating people, that you have a product truth, your truth is real, and that ultimately the customer is better off. That to me is the best marketing. Sorry, I just went on a tangent there. I'm so sorry. That's a hard one.
Man, that was good stuff. I was like, I think Seth Godin can take a seat to you now.
Uh, well, it's funny because I think the hardest part of being a customer is seeing through all the fluff. I think that's the best thing as a marketer, is how do we create those instances where a brand can stand out and feel like they give a shit. Sorry, my language there. They give a darn about the customer. And I think when you hear ads that are saying, well, we handpicked something, or we curated something, or we spent extra care to make sure every detail is perfect, I think people genuinely feel like it's going to be a better product because of that. And that they could tell their friends, oh, I bought that thing specifically because the they took extra care in making sure that the UI was great for me. And I think those are the stories that end up, when you tell a friend, that story, then I think as a marketer, I've done the best job in the world, and I've succeeded, because I can have a top of the line ad where it's on TV. But in reality, if you're talking to a treasurer or a procurement officer, and that procurement officer tells another procurement officer that they really like your product, or they bought it because of XYZ, and those XYZs came from me, then I think I should win an award at that point, because I think that's the best way that we can sell a product. And I know that's, we have big marketing budgets, we have all these big ad campaigns, but realistically, when people buy stuff, especially in the corporate world, it's like, well, I want to buy something that won't get me yelled at if my boss finds out and it sucks because everyone else has bought it. That makes me look good. Let's be real. People psychologically buy stuff because it makes them look good, regardless of any other situation. And that it generally does what it needs to do because everyone else has said it does. Um, yeah, I mean, that's kind of why we buy, right? I mean, you tell me, why do we buy stuff? Like, do you have a thought there? Because I think it's very much, showing off, right?
Certainly can be. Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, I was thinking a little bit about even just the origins of branding, right? And that it was this, seal of quality, whether it was like livestock or, to just indicate, the origin of something. And, you think about different brands that you like. Sometimes there's like some little detail that just shows this thoughtful additional mark of quality that maybe other people don't even see. Like I don't know why I was thinking as you were mentioning that I was thinking about this Tanner Goods leather belt that I bought like probably 15 years ago, and it's just like it's got this one little copper rivet on it that you can't even see once you like actually buckle the belt. But like anytime I see that, I'm like, that's such a cool, thoughtful detail, right? And you just appreciate it. But I think what you're saying about, in the actual marketing of products, that like when someone says this is hand picked or hand curated, I think those things, or even you mentioned the farmers market experience, I think it's been coming up a lot in a lot of conversations lately. Just it's like the more automated the world becomes, the more AI takes over. There's this counter movement of appreciating those thoughtful, like human attention to detail things, and that I think Seth Godin says it, more or less as like if you can't charge a premium, there's no brand.
Yeah. There's so many. I think brand, you bring up a good point about brand as a whole. Brand is sort of your stake in the ground. And that's, your your signature is your brand, right? And so to your point around identifying quality, I think there's been examples in the past where people try to remove brand and see if that sells. And ultimately people start looking for brands because brands have reputation and brands carry that weight. And so Salesforce couldn't create a bad product because if they did, their brand would be ruined, right? So there's a reputational um, need to make sure that your product is great. And I would say that even the biggest brands out there, like I work for Microsoft, if we have any moments where we don't function in a way that people expect us to, from a trust perspective or reliability, I think we are more in danger of being in a bad place than I would say even some of the mid-sized companies because we have such heavy weight, and I think we as marketers have to be mindful of how we do our marketing because the impact of what we say could echo way beyond um, just our one product line where I'm in charge of Surface, right? And I think to your shared observation, the counterculture, I think with all this automation and all this mass production, we lose sight of the effort it takes to put a belt together, to put a bag together. And I think we all want to be able to share with others that we chose this because someone really cared about this product and made it excellent. And it is so excellent that it's noteworthy enough for me to share with you that this is awesome. And you, I guess in some ways you take pride in the brands you wear. And I think that's also part of us signaling as marketers, like how can we ensure that customers feel happy and proud of the things that now they have in their home? Like if you look at your desk or if you look in your home, everything is a brand in some sense. Like whether it's a certain TV or if it's a certain computer, it's signaling to others that I have now chosen the lifestyle or a a dressing, so to speak, that says I believe in these brands. They're in front of me, and if you're going to ask me about them, I can give you a story of why I chose this one. I think that goes back to what we all do as marketing, is creating those stories that customers can then relay to others and say, I trust this brand similar to you because of XYZ. I love my Tumi bags. I'm not advocating that everyone go buy one, but I love them. They did me well on one tour and I brought it back into the store and they helped me get a new one on the spot, even though they didn't have to. I mean, those are the moments that you say, you know what, now I'm a lifelong believer. They did me right. And I think all brands in some regard, whether or not it's a customer service moment or it's a moment where you're just using it in front of your friends and it does something, and you're just proud of it. I think those are the things that we as marketers hope we could do in marketing, but sometimes the product also just does it because it's such a good product. And I think that's why you can't go around marketing a bad product because it becomes infinitely hard to retain that trust of a customer. And I think all around, we're all brand builders, we're all storytellers, but those stories have to be true and they'd be authentic. Otherwise, we could be amazing marketers, but it'll just fall flat.
That's really great perspective. And when you're thinking about launching something new, whether it's a new product or a new campaign, when you're in the work of this, how do you think about actually the right balance of that emotional story with the product story, right? And how do you connect the two?
I think for all the work that I've done across all the products, there is a need to have one, the product has to show up for you, right? If you're a marketer and you say certain things, the product has to show up. I think I have to look at the story of why we exist. Like what exactly is our ethos as a product? Like why was this product created? I think it's the first question I always ask when someone launches something new. I remember the many times at Amazon where we launched a new variant of Echo, and in these meetings, these 6-pager meetings, we would always circle stuff and then they'd say, "Does anyone have any questions?" And sometimes it raised me, so why exactly do we need this variation of this product? And the product owner will say something if it's not already mentioned in the doc, but their reasoning, their story, hopefully they tell a good story. And that's where the seed of all the work that I do comes from. Is like, what are we trying to solve? Why is it great? And then from there, what does this represent to our brand? What does this one thing do to enhance our product lineup? And then I start thinking, well, what are the customers going to think of it? Is it easy to tell a customer, or is this going to be hard? And then I start working around the narrative structure of, okay, so what stories can I tell as a customer? And I look at it from their point of view to make them feel like that this product has solved something in their lives. And I think that's something that makes my work fun as a storyteller, is that you get to then pretend to be the various customers who get to see it and the customers who don't. You almost have to be the customer that says, "Oh, I don't want it because of XYZ," and then figure out, okay, so how do I reframe that into a positive? Because there's going to be naysayers, who say, "Oh, I don't need that product," but maybe the product actually is something that they could use and they don't realize it. And in marketing, there's always those opportunities to say, well, let me see if I can create a narrative and a great story that says, actually, you didn't know, but this actually is perfect for you. Here's why. So there's a lot of that narrative storytelling we have to build, but the product itself from a spec perspective, from a feature perspective, has to also deliver up. And so when I'm thinking about launching a new product, it's taking the hardware, it's taking the service itself, understanding it fully, and then take it to the customer and saying, if I was a customer, would I like using this thing? What would I tell my friend about it if I were to like it? And then from that, I can start riffing off and creating those narratives, which end up being my storytelling strategy and themes when I actually do launch the product. Because then, we can all see ourselves using it. And I know that there's always plus or minuses to using focus groups, because focus groups can say certain things and not actually want your product, or they may say certain things and they may not necessarily be true. Sometimes they are. There's just snapshots. um but I appreciate hearing those as well, just to ground myself and say, okay, if could I win them over, what are the right things I could say there. But I think that's the balance of being someone who's trying to create that story, is what could a customer say to a friend about it, and what would make them happy. And um I think that goes back to that whole emotional thing, because you never say like, oh, I bought this because it was cheap. I don't know of anyone who says, I'm going to buy this because it was cheap, and then tell their friends about it if it's not just a simple commodity. I bought sugar because it's cheap. Oh, it's sugar. But you're not going to say, I bought a new AI tool because it was cheap. That's not something you're going to tell your friend. You're going to say, well, I bought this AI tool because it could do this, and I couldn't believe it could ever do something like that. And if I can find those moments within the product and highlight them to the audience that I'm looking for, then I think I've done my job to then get them excited, but also give them the ammunition to then share with a friend. And that to me is a great launch, is that people start repeating the things that you said, or the cool things about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, like I'm probably oversimplifying here, but I think people tend to buy stuff because they think doing so will make them look cool or smart or, insert adjective to others, but also to themselves, right? And so it's like this kind of emotional reason behind the purchase. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we were chatting. Um, Everyone wants to think that buyers are rational, and coming from an economics background, I studied econ as well. Like you can think that everything is rational and can fit into a spreadsheet and all that good stuff, and math can help you figure this out. But working in marketing, you realize people are not, but they rationalize their purchase after the fact, right? When they have to kind of make sense of what they did. So with that in mind, like how do you, and knowing that that's how things play out, like how do you build out messaging and campaigns and experiences where applicable that tap into that emotion, knowing that people purchase emotionally without feeling yourself like you're being manipulative, and also doing so in a way where you don't want the buyer down the road to be like, oh shoot, I was duped here.
I was thinking about that, and how we buy a lot of things, to your point, because for the moment we have some sort of a desire. Like I have, admittedly, I work at Microsoft, but I also have a MacBook in front of me. I have a Surface in front of me. So I like all brands. And, you know, I think that when we buy something, we expect it to do a certain thing. Maybe it's because everyone else has one, and so I want it too. Um, and it's, I think psychologically we try to say, okay, well, I bought it now. Um, it's going to do what I want it to do, right? And sometimes it doesn't. I mean, not every product will deliver the brand promise. Most products hopefully should. Um, I, as a marketer, if I'm in a situation where I know people are buying it, or I think they're buying it for one reason, but it's not the reason why I am marketing it, then I have to look at, what I'm saying and say, okay, so am I missing a brand truth here? Am I missing a product truth that customers are seeing? Because maybe they are buying it for a legitimate reason, and it is not just because they're self-justifying afterwards, but maybe there is something about it that is awesome that I'm just not missing. So I have to be curious myself as to what their self-signaling is afterwards, because I might have missed something. I think, it's hard to create a story, and I don't know if a moment in my own life in marketing where I can say, I've created that signaling afterwards. I would love to hear how. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how to control that. I think for us, is psychologically, we tend to want to create self satisfaction, and maybe just riffing off that, I wonder if there is like a post purchase mechanism, like a nudge, like an email or some other thing that, and I don't know if this is manipulation. I hope it's not. But the idea that you can then start picking up on those signals and then creating more of a groupthink moment, and maybe leveraging what you're hearing or what you're thinking, what you're self signaling afterwards as a marketing tool. I guess that would require maybe some focus group situations, but um, that's a hard one. I don't know of a way to control some of it. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can really control some of that, because let's say you buy a MacBook, a lot of people do. It's overpowered for most people, like a MacBook Pro. Um, you're gonna say, well, I'm I'm now a creator. I could do creative stuff. I'm now insured mentally that I can. I'm signaling to others that I have the power and the skill set. Yeah, I don't know if you can really control some of that per se. Is that what you're trying to ask? Like, how can you leverage some of that signaling? Or because I think some of that just comes fluidically from people telling others or telling themselves, right? Or are you thinking that we have a way to actually create or to control that narrative?
Yeah, I mean, we don't. I guess the nuance I would introduce there is like we have the ability to shape that narrative, and the degree to which we are good at our jobs, um, it shows up in how much that narrative is. To a previous answer you gave, like when people are repeating back to you what you've told them, that's a good signal, right? But yeah, I was more just curious about like how do we, if we all know, just broadly speaking, not only as marketers but also consumers, that we all purchase based on emotion. Like, how do we how do we respect that and the buyer and market to people in a way that after the fact they don't feel like they were kind of duped into purchasing something? And maybe there's not a good answer to this question. Like, it's just one of those that I think about sometimes. Um, and it could just be like not a great question. So it's okay if you're just like,
I think we as marketers owe it to the customers to be truthful in marketing. And that's something which we can't lie, right? That's the difference between manipulation and good marketing, is that, you know, the the truth isn't there. And there's obviously ways to pick up on the signals of what people are saying to themselves and then amplify that. That's actually an interesting thought, is that once you start hearing what others are saying about your product. And I think Apple, if you look at some of their products, they've actually taken marketing and taken advantage of that. The original MacBook Pro that was launched a few years ago, sorry, not original, the one that was launched a few years ago, didn't have an HDMI or didn't have some of these other ports. But they found, I assume they found that a lot of people who are creators, who are professionals in video, were using the MacBook Pro, and that became a signal to others that, oh, if I have a MacBook Pro, then I'm a creator. You're a MacBook Pro, you're a creator. We're all creators, and some of the needs of a creator is an HDMI port for whatever reason. And so that could be a situation where they've taken the signals that of where the product is going and who's actually buying it, and then amplifying a reason why to buy, or and amplifying another thing to share with others that could be a differentiator. So in fact, that's a situation where I think engineering is prompted by marketing. But as a whole, like we shouldn't be manipulating people, even though if marketing as defined is the change of behavior or the acknowledgement of a new thing that um, maybe someone didn't know before, and now because of marketing they know of it. I don't think that's manipulation if you are truthful about what you're talking about, and I don't think it can ever be. But if you now start saying lies, then you're in a short-term gain situation, and that's not marketing anymore. Not to me, anyway. Um, that's just lying. And as a good marketer, you shouldn't lie. You shouldn't need to lie. You should be able to tell a good story based on what your product can do. And if that means reframing certain features because you discovered just by reading all those documents, oh, hey, how come we're not talking about this certain aspect of the service that is amazing? And maybe it was sort of a engineering afterthought. That in itself is taking a product truth and bumping it up. And I think those are what we should be focusing on as on marketers is how can we take our skills in understanding what a customer expects from a product? Because I think a lot of people expect certain things from products. Finding those great sort of unintentional benefits sometimes that engineer or someone else who was just putting in what they thought was the right thing for that feature or that product, and say, "Oh, whoa, that's interesting. How come we're not talking about this? I think this could actually be a game changer if we actually brought it up." Um, those are the truths that I enjoy, and I think if again, it's all about honesty and not saying what our product can't do. And I know you brought the example where some companies will talk about a product that doesn't even exist yet. I don't think that's lying per se. I do think there's something disingenuous about promoting a product as this, but I also understand the business practice of, well, I won't build it until someone wants it. So I need marketing to go out and see if anyone is even considering it. And then if it's something which does exist or could exist, then I'll make it, or if people want it. I mean, that isn't necessarily manipulation. That's like market testing. But if you say that the product does exist, then that's a different situation because I think that's an ethical thing where if I can't market something which if I tell someone you can buy today and he can't buy today, then that's not truthful. So I think there's that nuance of what it means to be ethical, and I think that's where manipulation versus just nudging, there's a difference there.
Yeah, well said. And so in behavioral terms, how do you help people feel good about their decision and to help reinforce, and you've been touching on this quite a bit, like to reinforce the emotional high from the purchase with their actual experience that's delivered so they stick around?
I think you have to know your product well as a marketer and create moments of pride for the customer. I think it's a little easier when it comes to like a computer or a laptop where the customer sees it every day. It's a little bit different, I think, from certain services. Well, maybe you could do both. In my world, when I think about creating a moment, I focus on the details, and those things seem to be most impactful. For example, I'm currently building this entire campaign for Surface, where instead of talking about all the big speeds and feeds and the features, which normally we do just because we want to benchmark ourselves, talking specifically about the nuances of something, our keyboard, for example, and how it has slight curvature, um, of sort of a small, I would say, non-marketable feature in some regard, like, oh, it's got a little curve on it. But to tell the story of why it exists, and in this case, because we know that a person's finger is not flat, and so it has a little curvature. The key travel goes 1.3 millimeters. All that technical stuff is the product truth. But sharing with the customer that, hey, all that stuff aside, if you just touch the thing and start typing, all that engineering that's been put into gives you a better type gives you a better press, gives you a better, you notice the difference, right? And that's where, as a marketer, I'm trying to create those stories for the sake of what you just said around signaling yourself. There is something placebo about telling people it's a better keyboard, but also when it is a better keyboard, that signals to yourself, wow, this thing's really great. That's a product high that continues onward, because even if you don't think about it, it becomes part of your flow. When someone asks, hey, why did you buy a keyboard, or why did you buy a Surface? All that marketing should have pointed that customer to then be able to say, oh, did you know that this keyboard is amazing? And that, check this out, try typing on it. That continues that product high for this particular product, because now they continuously feel how good it is, like how wonderful this thing is. But they would never have discovered it in that framing unless I, as a marketer, would have put that, I wouldn't say manipulate, but put that in their head, so to speak, as a satisfaction point, that potential high, a potential wow moment, product wow moment. And I think for a lot of us, regardless of product, you have to search for those moments in whatever you're selling, and say, well, can I make this a product high? Will this be something that they will be excited about on day 2 or day 3? And even if that's not the right answer, even if they say no, they won't be excited on day 2, but will they be excited on day 60 when someone talks to them about that product and suddenly they get that euphoria again? They have that moment to signal to others. I think that's the trick, is that a lot of us want to believe that we can keep people high constantly, but that becomes norm, right? And so, just like any other experience, becomes just the day to day. But when you have a chance to then highlight that to someone else, like, oh, this is why I bought this. Here's my truth. Here's my, try it. That re-engages that emotion again. And um, I think that's what we should be striving when it comes to good marketing, when it comes to that experiential bit, is that we want customers to feel how good that experience is. And ultimately, if they love it and continue loving it, then if we have a new product, they'll probably love the next one, because now they said, I'm so satisfied with what this does for me that now you've brought that high back. And now I'm excited for the next one. I think Apple does a really good job getting people excited about the new thing, because when you buy your first iPhone, you're like, this is great. This is an amazing experience. And then it's like every day. But then when you think about it, when you launch the next iPhone, suddenly those emotions come rushing back. And only good marketing, I think a good story, will allow that customer to tap in those same feelings again. And I think that's why loyalty, once you end up selling a product to a customer, they'll keep coming back as long as you can give them a good reason to. And I think that is the true high when it comes to both B2B and B2C, is finding those moments to continuously nudge when appropriately, but also letting the customer, planting that happy moment seed, whatever that thing is, to then have them be able to tell that story to themselves and to others.
Yeah, that's good. So, in your experience working in retail, but also across online channels, how does the context shape emotion and how people just react to experiences? For example, when people are in stores, sometimes they just have that, like, I want this now, I got to buy it now feeling, versus being online, it can be a bit more reflexive.
I think there's different customer purchasing journeys in those environments. It's funny when you said that, I thought about something we talked about before this podcast started, which was the dentist office, and how, changing that entire environment and changing that experience actually enables the end person to feel completely different. And that's one of those examples where if you're sitting in a stark room, the dentist office anyway, the waiting room, you're likely maybe getting a magazine, you're just sitting there waiting for the dentist to come up. But what if you could change that experience and create an experience where you're in a safer environment and so on? And I only bring that up because I think when we're buying something online, you're free to be um, you're free to be dumb in the sense that you may not know anything about the product, but no one's going to judge you if you're online, right? You're going to be able to shop around. You get all the facts. You might get thrown a lot of terminologies, but online, no one will say, "Oh, huh, that's wrong. That's not incorrect." You have safety in being online. I think that's why people like shopping online right now, is that you're not going to be judged by what you pick up off the rack. Um, if you're online, because no one is watching you click on the buy button. No one is watching you put stuff in your shopping cart. I think you could take advantage of that. I mean, in retail, I train down the idea that to be a, to retail salespeople, when I have that opportunity to say, like, customers are coming in um, because they've done some research, but they need validation. They're asking you, the retail salesperson, to validate: did I learn what I did online? Is it true? And is this laptop or is this thing that I'm looking for really as good as what the online says? And you know, I think that's a very different conversation when you think about it in the store. I'm not talking about commodities like tomato sauce. You can't really ask the salesperson, "Hey, is this a better tomato sauce?" Unless you get it at a farmer's market, in which then you can have those conversations. But you're not going to a Whole Foods and having that. Well, maybe a Whole Foods, not a Safeway per se. But I think that's the difference between the the in-store experience and how you could reframe it, is when the customer comes in, supporting them, or talking to them knowing that they're just looking to either get a yes or no. Is this what I really thought it was? Understanding that behavior. And then what marketing can I put in the store, knowing that that's where they're in that journey path, to then enable them to feel good about purchasing the device. And if they've done research on Surface in my category product, and they've looked up all the details, looked up all the facts, they're going to come into the store, and based on customer research and stuff, they're going to ask certain sets of questions. We have to be able to respond to them, be thoughtful in how we answer them, is a marketing play. And so I have to respond in a way that affirms, "Hey, this is exactly what you're looking for." Or if the customer says, "Oh, I heard the pen's not very good," well, then let's find ways to change that perception and show off what it could do. And that means equipping them with um, good, truthful marketing, and then an example along the way if we could get them to do a demo. But there, if you do it in a way that, if you present that stuff in a safe way, that isn't like, "Oh, you're dumb, that's not how it works," but rather, let me show you how this actually functions. I think the internet has it a little differently. That changes the opportunity, and I think it actually opens the customer to be more willing to even spend more, because now they trust that that person has their best interests in mind. And that's all perception, right? I mean, the salesperson may never see them again, but if you can empower that salesperson to have empathy and to feel like they're now a partner. And I think in some ways, we hope that in an online world, we could find that same partner too. And in fact, I think that's one of the things which might be the next thing, especially with AI, is we're using AI as like a shopping partner. I don't know about you, but I will go on AI and type in, "Hey, is this tool really what it does?" Or, "Can you tell me more about this tool? I don't understand this tech doc." I think there's actually an interesting place now where we have AI, but I also feel like there's still a gap, because we know AI is not exactly 100% there yet in terms of, is it true? Because you always see that comment, AI may make mistakes, right? And I think we're looking for an expert. We're looking for a friend in shopping. And I think there's probably a place in this world again where, like, the real person agent may actually be a value add when it comes to doing shopping, similar to back in the day when there were travel agents who would help you shop for flights and shop for various things. I think the purchasing journey, we've lost a little bit of that humanity, that expertness from people. And again, we go back to that farmers market. Those farmers are experts in the food that they've grown. We probably need more experts that we could personally talk to when it comes to some of the bigger B2B things online. I wonder if there's an avenue to have like the expert. I'm not thinking of a new service. I'm thinking of like a Fiverr service, but for experts to help you shop. A service. There's there's that trust that I think we all want, and as marketers, we're trying to do our best to create that trust through words. But actually, it's funny. I think that might be a great service. Is just the idea of, can we hire someone just for 5 minutes who's an expert to just tell me what this is, and help me buy something or help me compare. I think that could be a real place, whether the company itself provides it, which obviously they have their own biases, but if there's other places that we can look for it. And of course the internet has podcasters and product reviewers, and that's a really great um, proxy for it. But I wonder if there is a place where, again, either if the company or otherwise has someone who they could just talk to. And I think, end of the day, we all just want to talk to someone and just be and not be judged. And online has done that, except there's no one talking. And in the stores, there's a little bit of the opposite, but um, I think that's where we as marketing have to create the right moments that support that shopping experience. But yeah, I think it comes down to like, we want to feel like we made a good purchase, and as we go through the purchasing journey, as a customer buys stuff, we need to nudge them to help them feel like they are making a good decision that they can be proud of. They're not going to be fired over. That will save them money or save time. And I think ultimately, once we could accomplish that, then the salespeople take over and close the deal. But we just had to make them feel emotionally comfortable coming into that conversation, regardless of whether it's in person or in a digital sense.
So, looking ahead, what excites you the most about where product marketing is going, especially as AI and behavioral data all start blending together?
The best part of AI right now, as a product marketer, is that for the moment, you're getting an extra set of eyes on things. You're getting an extra partner to riff off of. You're getting an extra set of either validations or whatnot. Obviously, you have to trust what the AI say, but I think now with all this hybrid work and this remote work stuff, there was once a time where, if you wanted to do a whiteboarding session, you'd grab your team, go into a room, and just start whiteboarding and ideating and going that path. But with this whole remote work thing and a lot more startups working in various distant locations, the fact that you have such an amazing tool that could disseminate large amounts of information and start summarizing and start ideating with you. One of the things that I've done that excites me a lot about AI is I have all these ideas in my head around, oh, can we do this type of activation? Can we do this type of marketing? Will this narrative make any sense? And if you throw it in the AI tools and start, riffing, challenging, having the AI challenge you on that marketing, even forcing you to think about considerations that don't make sense, or even asking it, hey, ask me the most off the wall critiques of this idea. You're not going to get the best answers yet, but you're going to get some pretty good ones. And I think as product marketers, we need to start leveraging some of these tools and not be afraid that this will replace us. And I don't think it'll replace us for any length of time, given some of the answers I keep seeing. But I think as a tool, it's such an amazing time where you have such immense partnering opportunities with AI to get ideas ideated and to get ideas sort of fleshed out a little bit. And I think that's where, as a marketer, I'm most excited about. And I think that's where all marketers should be thinking around, is how can we use these tools as a collaboration tool to collaborate with the AI, to challenge your perceptions, to challenge your ideas, And I think that'll ultimately have a better outcome. One of the more recent things I've been doing, we have Copilot at Microsoft, of course, and I get these great tech docs on product, and they tell us every little detail or nuance about it. And if I want to discover more about a certain feature, I can ask AI, hey, AI, you know, of all this stuff that I've found, and Copilot does a interestingly very good job of this. Tell me all the tech specs about the keyboard on this particular SKU on this particular thing, and it has the ability to like pull multiple sources, do researching for me, and present to me a report that says here are all the facts about this particular thing. You know, I get all the fun nuggets in terms of unintentional sort of benefits from AI calling out features, not knowing that they were discarded, not knowing that they were minimized, because to AI doesn't know if this feature was something that isn't talked about a lot or is not up there, or maybe it knows what the top line things are, but some AIs, especially Copilot right now, just flows everything neutrally to me. And so that gives me fresh eyes to say, oh, is this something that was discarded that maybe I should be thinking about? And so I think there's a lot of nuances to I as a marketer I'm excited about, both as a collaboration tool and one that helps me sort of synthesize a lot of data and quickly get result, and especially just again the ideation aspect. I would love more people just to jump in there, throw in an idea, and say, "Hey, challenge me on this idea. I want to grow it into something." And AI so far, regardless of the systems that I've seen, both Claude, OpenAI, Copilot, others, all seem to do a good job to help break that creative um, block sometimes, and push forward. So that's where I'm really excited about all this stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. Andrew, I know we're at time now, but this has been great having you on. For people that want to find you online to learn more about you or maybe connect with you, where's the best place for them to do this, to do so?
I'm happy to engage anyone who just wants to have an open conversation on LinkedIn. So just find my name, Andrew Lee, Microsoft. I'm in Seattle. Um, there's a picture of me looking off to the side because it's my wedding photo as my LinkedIn headshot. So there's that. Um, but no, I'm happy to chat, and I'm genuinely excited around this the idea that people, your AI question aside, but I'm generally excited people are starting to think about experiences and how to not just think about features and specs and hard facts, which an economist, like I'm a classically trained economist, would do, and think about what it actually means for a customer to actually hold that thing, to believe in it. I think that's where our storytelling needs to start moving toward, is the idea that we could talk about facts, but really that story, why it exists, the reason to believe, that's what's going to get a customer excited, and that's what they're going to buy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Andrew. It's been great having you on.
Thanks, Andrew. This is awesome.
Thanks.